Adam Kokesh, a sergeant in the Marine Corps, speaks about the ever-changing rules of engagement in Iraq and the siege in Fallujah.
My name is Adam Kokesh. I served as a sergeant on the Marine Corps Civil Affairs team in the Fallujah area from February to September of 2004. And I actually volunteered to go to Iraq. I was a reservist in an artillery unit, and when I found out my unit was getting called up, I decided I didn't want to miss the party. So I found out that a civil affairs group at Camp Hamilton was looking for volunteers, and so I went out on my way to volunteer for that. And I was against the war before the war, even believing all of the lies that were told by Colin Powell at the UN, believing all of the intelligence, believing all the spin. I didn't think it was going to be worth it. But I thought that afterwards what we were doing was cleaning up our mess and really responsible foreign policy and genuinely trying to do good by the Iraqi people, and that was something I wanted to be a part of and something that I enthusiastically risked my life for. This is the rules of engagement card that I was issued for our deployment to Iraq, and this is held up as the gold standard of conduct in the occupation right now, and they couldn't even cut it square. But I'll just read a part of it. It says, "Nothing on this card prevents you from using deadly force to defend yourself. Enemy military and paramilitary forces may be attacked subject to the following instructions. Positive identification is required prior to engagement. Positive identification is reasonable certainty," and that's in quotes on the card, "that your target is a legitimate military target." And of course, we're supposed to keep this in our breast pocket here. But when Marines are put in a situation where they receive fire and all they see is a muzzle flash coming from a building, and they don't have positive identification, but they know that if they return fire through that window or towards that building, that they're more likely to live through whatever's going on. It's a really difficult situation, and I think it's criminal to put such patriotic Americans who have sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America in a situation where their morals are at odds with their survival instincts. During the siege of Fallujah, we changed rules of engagement more often than we changed our underwear. At first it was, you follow the rules of engagement, you do what you're supposed to do, and then there were times when it was you can shoot any suspicious observer, so someone with binoculars and a cell phone was fair game. And that really opened things up to a lot of subjectivity. But also firing at muzzle flashes into the city, firing Mark 19s into the city became common practice. One day in the middle of the summer, we were closed due to heavy fighting in Fallujah, and that was the time that Zarqawi was there. And I got a random call on my field phone at the checkpoint saying, "You need to take one Marine and get up to the road and stop any black Opel that comes your way." Because Zarqawi was fleeing the city in a black Opel. And all I could say was, "What's an Opel?" And so I got out there, and I was with my Marine. He was behind me, and I saw a black blur coming towards us, and I was like, "Hey, is that a black Opel?" And he was like, "That's a black blur, Sergeant." So I got up in the road, and I pointed my rifle down the freeway, and this was the main road going between Fallujah and Baghdad, and at this car that's going about 50 miles an hour, yelled, "Kif! Stop!" And it whizzed right by me, and I turned around and I was like, "Oh crap, I hope I don't have to shoot out his tires." But fortunately he stopped, and I pulled him out. The other Marine was right behind me. We got there, we pulled him out of the car and said, "We need to search you." And they didn't tell me that I was looking for Zarqawi. So I just was like, "All right, get out of the car." And he had his wife and his kids in the back seat, and I frisked him and called up and said, "Got one PAX detained, please advise, over." And my staff sergeant came out, and he ran out there, trotted up, after coming out of the air-conditioned building in the back, and he pulls out the All Zarqawi Wanted poster and looks at him and looks at the poster and goes, "It's not him, let him go." And that kind of thing where, we're just, harassing people unnecessarily is really kind of part of daily life there. And eventually we set up a proper checkpoint, and I was relieved and went back inside, and the Marines that were there were checking almost every car that came through, and they found a couple of guys that had a bag of cash in their back seat, and they detained them on suspicion. And we're like, "All right, well, we're going to detain them and interrogate them." And so they were zip cuffed and hooded, and I was told to go out and get them and pick them up, and so I picked them up in my Humvee, got the bag of cash, brought him back to the office where it was air conditioned, and sat him down, and was just keeping an eye on them, and then the interrogators got there, and they were like, why the heck are you guys being so nice to these people? They started roughing them up and throwing their heads against the wall and, preparing them for interrogation. And they dragged them out of the office, and apparently they got actually reprimanded on the outside of the office by one of our officers for engaging in that unnecessary behavior. And then they interrogated them, and they found out that there was no reason to detain them any further. And the bag of cash was about this big, which would have been a lot of American money, but in Iraqi dinars, it was only about $10,000, $15,000. And so they let them go, just like that. And I can tell you, if that money wasn't intended for the insurgency beforehand, it was after that. So when I got activated 2 weeks before we deployed, and I found out that what we were going to be doing in civil affairs was exactly what the president was saying we were going to be doing on TV, in terms of working on schools and mosques and clinics and water projects and really rebuilding Iraq. And I was really excited about that. I thought we were going to be the tip of the spear, and we were going to be leading the charge to rebuild Iraq. And we were six-man teams attached to these larger infantry units, regiments or battalions usually, and you couldn't go anywhere in the Fallujah area without 6 Humvees with machine guns, let alone mere 6 Marines. So we had to beg these infantry commanders to tag along on their convoys to do our missions, and we found ourselves constantly struggling to justify our existence to them. And we came up with a slogan: we care so that you don't have to. And to the macabre Marine Corps sense of humor, I know to a lot of the vets in the room, it's pretty funny, but it's easy to step back and think, man, we got units in Iraq whose job is to care so that someone else doesn't have to, because that someone else isn't just those grunts that we were attached to, but it was everybody all the way up. We care so that Paul Bremer doesn't have to, so that the chiefs of staff don't have to, so that Congress doesn't have to, so that Cheney doesn't have to, as if he ever pretended to, and so that the president himself can gush on and on about how much he cares about the Iraqi people while continuing a policy that is decimating their country.